I was raped when I was 4 years old. My mother was a Methodist church organist in Wilmer, Minnesota, a typical Midwest small town. A classical pianist and accomplished piano teacher, she often attended organ or piano workshops, so she needed a babysitter. She would pack up my older brother and me and to stay at a fellow church member's house. This family had a son who was tall, huge for his age. Everyone called him Shorty, and he was 11 or 12 when I was 4. One afternoon, when the parents were headed out for a couple of hours, he was instructed to watch me so I didn't get into trouble. The minute they drove down the driveway, he grabbed me, threw me on the old shag carpeting, pulled down my pants, and raped me. Then he whispered in my ear, "I'll kill you if you tell." I grew up in a family of secret keepers. I didn't know what that meant at the time, but I instinctively knew that I couldn't go home and tell my parents what had happened. There is a term called toxic shame that is well known among mental health professionals. In his best-selling book, Healing the Shame That Binds You, John Bradshaw describes toxic shame as being multi-generational. It is passed from one generation to the next to the next. When my mother was 90 and I had just told her that my then husband was having an affair and divorcing me, out of the blue, she told me the most earth-shattering news. She had been raped by her piano teacher when she was 15, and she kept going back each week to study with him until she graduated from high school 3 years later. A veteran secret keeper, she never told her mother or anyone. After this shocking revelation, she died just a few months later at age 91. In that moment, I realized that I had been carrying her unarticulated shame and guilt around my entire life, and the shame and worthlessness I felt just piled on top of hers. Analyzing it all years later, my mother's coping mechanism to bury her shame was perfectionism. Not a bad thing for a concert pianist. She actually told me when I was little, if I could be perfect and always high-performing, people would love and admire me. For both of us, being high-functioning ensured that we could keep our shame and the sources of it a secret. Intellectually, I was proud of what I'd accomplished in school, college, graduate school, and at work, but until I came to grips with my own shame story, all the accolades, honors, and successes felt muted and undeserved. They did nothing to curb my perpetual feeling of isolation and sense of not really belonging. Just as devastating, I realized that my feelings of isolation and differentness made it difficult to hear or authentically connect with others. Unfortunately, Shorty was not the last encounter I'd have with a pedophile. I was a musically gifted child, and mother signed me up to study violin in the 4th grade. Nothing is more grating than an ill-played violin, and while I excelled at singing and later the flute, I never seemed to improve on the violin. As a perfectionist, mother couldn't comprehend it. She and I were both frustrated, and I begged to quit lessons. Years later, I would remember that my violin teacher, a man with thick, black, brill-creamed hair, kept touching me as we sat on folding chairs in my grade school classroom. And in 5th grade, on a cruise of the Great Lakes with my mother and a friend of hers, the 50-something ship radio operator named Norman touched me as another girl, and I sat on his lap in a small room on the ship. I soon unconsciously buried these experiences as deep into my brain as I could and moved on. But I still felt damaged, unusual, and not in that cool, trendy way, out of step, and would grow up to feel eternally misunderstood. I also felt I must be stupid or a freak. There was something inherently wrong with me, and I didn't know what or why. The prevalence of sexual child abuse is hard to measure because it is, not surprisingly, underreported. I'll kill you if you tell. We don't tell. The National Center for Victims of Crime reports that 1 in 5 girls are sexually abused and 1 in 20 boys. There is a brilliant book called A Little Book on the Human Shadow, written by poet, essayist, and activist Robert Bly, that gave me a framework for what I had been feeling for a long time. Everyone here recognizes the phrase, "Oh, she has baggage," or "Yikes, he brings a lot of baggage to that relationship." I speculate that everyone in this virtual room is actually comfortable saying, "Sure, yeah, I have baggage." And then we'd laugh. If we were gathered together today, we'd have another glass of wine. We might rib each other about it. We are all in the same boat. But even though we are surrounded by others in that boat, we still feel alone. Why? Because we are fundamentally afraid of our own stories. I didn't understand what having baggage really meant, and I didn't understand how I got it in the first place. I have recognized over the years that some people carry theirs in a chic designer clutch, and others require an enormous airport luggage cart. For mine, I wanted a full matching set of Louis Vuitton. Robert Bly writes, "When we were 1 or 2 years old, we had a ball of energy. But one day we noticed that our parents didn't like certain parts of that ball. They said things like, 'Can't you be still?' Or, 'It isn't nice to try and kill your brother.'" He describes an invisible bag that consists of the parts of us that our parents didn't like, and I'll add that we didn't like. In order to keep their love, we had to put the bad things into the bag. Our anger, our sadness, our rowdiness, our fear, our embarrassment, an overactive imagination, and plenty more. Bly says by the time we go to grade school, our bag is quite large, and then our teachers have their say. Good children don't get angry over such little things. We do a lot of bag stuffing in high school, and it's not evil grown-ups that pressure us, but people our own age. Any parts of us that were average, not cool enough, not attractive enough, not smart enough, not popular enough, not sexy enough, all went into the bag. All our differentness went into the bag. The bag, or baggage, is now a mountain, a mile high. And if we don't recognize this mile-high bag for what it is and the role it plays in our lives, we will subconsciously or unconsciously keep piling on more disappointment, pain, guilt, anger, and despair. And the bag gets miles higher. And carrying it around everywhere and trying to conceal it becomes an art, a full-time job, affecting who we present to others. This is when shame insidiously turns us into needing and living a false self so we can navigate our families, our jobs, our lives. We may be adept at this, as I was, but on every level, it's exhausting. Just a note about my own bag. I didn't know I carried one until I was walking on a street in Aspen with a boyfriend when I was 27. Walking back to our hotel after a late dinner, I suddenly was presented with a mural of sorts, a three-dimensional mirage of the 3 distinct sexual abuse incidents in full color, all linked. My stories from ages 4, 9, and 10 in full view, no detail spared. Stopped in my tracks, I watched the stories unfold, hanging in the atmosphere above the pavement in the middle of the quiet street. New York Times best-selling teen fiction author Sarah Dessen writes, "Your past is always your past. Even if you forget it, it remembers you." I am proud of the 10 years I spent in therapy, the entire decade of the 90s. My psychologist, Jim, was the first person to use the word shame. I could barely say it without it getting stuck in my throat like a hairball. A single syllable conjured up all of the things that had been done to me, but also all the things I had done that I was ashamed of. Unresolved shame begets more shame. This is the thing about shame. 100% of us feel it at some point in our lives. It is a strangely unifying and universal part of the human condition that crosses borders, ages, socioeconomic classes, cultures, and sexes. It is so universal that it has birthed a blog called Post Secret, sponsored by Frank Warren, who invites people to anonymously mail postcards containing their deepest, darkest secrets. I'll share 3 of them with you. Now that I'm sober, I just feel sorry for everyone else who still drinks. Inside this envelope is the ripped up remains of a suicide note I didn't use. I feel like the happiest person on the earth. Now. I give decaf to customers who are rude to me. The blog has had more than 820 million views, and he has received thousands of postcards. There are 3 primary causes of shame. Shame 1. This was my shame. Shame we feel that was caused by others. While much of it today is concealed, certain stories are all over the news with the Me Too and anti-bullying movements in the workplace. Shame 2. Shame caused by things we do include addictions of all types, cheating on partners and spouses, overeating and eating disorders, lying, shopping too much and hiding what you've purchased, bullying and exploiting others, having an abortion, giving a child up for adoption, cheating on taxes and anything else, fabricating resumes and successes at work, taking credit for something someone else accomplished, stealing, poor money management, sexual behaviors in and out of the bedroom. This list could go on and on and on. And there is a noxious trend that has mushroomed because of the ubiquitous nature of social media, shaming others. Mom shaming is such a huge thing that in a Google search, I got more than 15 million results in half a second. On March 10th, 2019, the New York Times had an above-the-fold article called The Industrial Revolution of Shame. Because of our phones and viral video, a scene is captured, shared, posted, and archived for millions to gawk at. The article says, new technologies have radically expanded our ability to make and distribute a product, and that product is our judgment of one another. The promise of a video going viral inspires shamers to do harm to others at the speed of light. And there is another treacherous habit of certain women to be nasty to other women in the workplace. One of the 3 reasons they do it, according to a 2013 Psychology Today article, is for sport. Abusers discount it, saying, oh, it's my sense of humor, or she's too sensitive, blaming the recipient of the nastiness with an intolerant eye roll. We call them mean girls, even though they are grown women. And shame 3, the final type is feeling shame about who we are, and this may be the saddest kind of shame. LGBTQ children grow up feeling this way. So do immigrants, the homeless, refugees, people with disabilities, anyone who is made to feel other. Shame about how we look, our teeth, our eyes, our skin, our weight, our wrinkles is fueling an almost $361 billion global personal care market this year in 2021. We really hate how we look. And these 3 types of shame cover all of us here. And I say enough. I don't know about you, but I got tired of being a secret keeper. I got tired of carrying a bag that's miles high. I got tired of abandoning control and power to bullies. I got tired of thinking I am extinguishing that original spark of shame when in fact all I was doing was fanning it with new shaming behaviors. And again, I say enough. And this is where Sunny comes in. I believe the only way to be truly happy and successful in developing healthy business and personal relationships, relationships that are sustainable and can drive satisfaction, loyalty, and ultimately revenue, is to climb out of the deep end of shame, call it what it is, and own it once and for all. Walk out of the shadows into the bright light. Cut the tether of your baggage. I don't care what shape or color your shame is, and I won't judge you or what's in your bag. If I unconsciously hang on to my shame, I cannot be focused on you. I am not hearing you. I cannot intuitively know what you need. I cannot see you if I am not willing to risk you seeing me. I even told a friend that I didn't have confidence that my story, this story, was worth telling. Maybe it wasn't awful enough. But I now own it. I own all of it. The original shame, all of my subsequent behaviors that made me feel worse, the shadows, the miles-high bag, and all the shit that's in it. I have chosen a sunnier destiny. Relationships are naturally multifaceted, but for them to fully succeed, you have to commit to being all in. So what does all in look like? I've created an infographic that you can use as a cheat sheet to find the daylight and joy in your business and personal relationships. Number 1, ears. Listen to the voice of your client. Number 2, core, your differentiating strategy and messaging. Number 3, brain, your relevance and vision for your client. And number 4, eyes, know the horizon. And number 5, legs, your past experiences, your source of power. Number 6, heart, love your work. Number 7, hands, your creative center. But if you don't own your shame, here is how it sabotages your ability to effectively connect with others. Number 1, ears. You can't hear the voice of the client. It's muffled and garbled because all you hear are the "you aren't good enough, you aren't worthy" voices in your head. Number 2, core. The pain you feel is at your very core. You fear discussing controversial or intimate or painful things with clients, even in business. You are afraid of being different or being misunderstood. You fear losing the client or customer or your job because you aren't capable or clever enough. You are afraid they will see through your veneer. Number 3, brain. You typically feel solace in being smart and living in your head. But because you question your own relevance and validity when asked, "What is your vision for your client?" you answer, "I don't know." Number 4, eyes. The horizon you see is masked and hazy by your shame story. It looks murky through your shame lens. Number 5, legs. Professionals focus on the power of their past experience. They say, "I've done all these things," but when questioned about how their expertise relates to a new problem or opportunity, they lose confidence and can't translate their experience into new relevance. Number 6, heart. Too many high-performing professionals don't like their jobs, even their careers. They ask, "Is this all there is?" Addictions, depression, and other mental health disorders, even suicide, are common. We read about them every day. People are embarrassed about this feeling, and that makes it worse. The heart is where all their self-condemnation lives. Number 7, hands. Shame narrows the bandwidth of a person's creativity. And your desire to control your feelings of shame, you self-edit and self-inhibit. You feel less expansive, less explosive. You can't feel creative if you don't feel open. Bottom line, you must surrender your story to hear someone else's. I have 2 final sunny stories to share before I close today. The first relates to my volunteer work in the LGBTQ community. I was one of the first straight allies to serve as president of the board of any major LGBTQ center in the U.S. Our clients grew up like I did, feeling shame from the earliest days of their lives, covering up, denying, keeping secrets, being bullied, afraid to love. Their courage and bravery helped me find my authenticity in the words to tell my own story. They helped me heal. And 5 weeks after my third husband told me he didn't love me anymore and wanted a divorce, I was on a flight from LaGuardia back to Dallas. I didn't tell you earlier he was my third husband. I used to feel shame about that too. Right before the Christmas holiday, the airplane was packed and I couldn't have felt more isolated and alone. A large young woman with a toddler started down the aisle, and everyone watched her with wide eyes as her diaper bags literally hit every head of the aisle-seated passengers as she walked by. And of course, she and her son were my seatmates. As she's getting settled, she hands me her son, and she never takes him back. I ask her son's name, and she says, Eternal. I heard my voice blurt, of course it is. The man seated behind me said, if you'd like to give the mother and her son more room, the seat next to me is available. I moved back, ordered a glass of wine, and focused on my book. With 30 minutes left of our flight, the man closed his 4-inch file, and we chatted about more than an hour's worth of subjects. We lived 5 minutes away from each other in Dallas, and he gave me his card. That same day, he had been to a fancy luncheon at the Waldorf Astoria for KPMG stalwarts and saw a former chair of the firm and his wife, who were both in their 70s. My new seatmate's wife had died 3 years earlier from cancer, and he had not had a single date. Seeing this devoted couple in the lobby, he admitted that he didn't want to be alone when he was their age and pledged that day to find someone to ask out. As Glenn said in his wedding toast to me almost 8 years ago, and then 7 hours later, I met Deborah. And in my toast, I said, all because of a child, a tiny messenger named Eternal. Come with me. I've got you. Say enough and make it stick. Thank you.